Alright guys, welcome to episode number 3 of Grizzly Talks Football. This episode, we got week 1 NFL reactions. You guys have not been watching too much, but I still take great pride in posting these episodes for you guys. So be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and hit the bell for more videos so you don't miss them. Anyways, let's just get straight to it. So for the NFL and maybe some college football, I'll be using Sports Reference. So for NFL, I'll be using Pro Football Reference and Sports Reference for college football scores as well. So anyways, on to the first game. So first up, we have the Thursday night football game between the Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. Wow, what a way to start the season. How about that? Both teams were incredible. Ravens and Kansas City are two of the AFC's top contenders, and they had a shootout, well, more or less. But it was two juggernauts playing against each other, and good grief, it delivered. So for the Ravens' offensive stats, Lamar Jackson was the guy who had the most yards out of any player. 273 passing yards on 26 of 41 for a touchdown, no picks. Unfortunately, he did fumble once, but he had 122 yards on the ground, which is just unbelievable. And Derrick Henry, a lot of people said he wasn't going to get a touchdown with the Ravens. They were completely wrong about that one. He was able to get a touchdown as well. In receiving-wise, Isaiah Likely was the man in that receiving core. 9 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. He could have had one more if he had a shoe size less than he had. Just Zay Flowers had 6 for 37, and Justice Hill had 6 for 52, with Rashad Bateman having a 38-yarder and a 15-yard reception along with that. And as for the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, 291 yards on 20 of 28 passing, a touchdown and a pick, and he even caught a pass for 2 yards, and he had 2 carries for 3 yards. The run game wasn't that impressive, even though Xavier Worthy and Pacheco had rushing touchdowns. And speaking of Xavier Worthy, he had 2 touchdowns on the game for his debut, his NFL debut. He had a rushing touchdown for 21 yards, and then he had a 35-yard touchdown or something like that. On the receiving end, Rashee Rice went completely bananas. 7 catches, 103 yards for him. Mr. Swift over here, Kelsey, had 3 catches for 34 yards. Yeah, the fantasy owners are in shambles. Yeah. And that was pretty much it for the Chiefs receiving core. It was just Worthy and Rice. And as for the Ravens defense, Roquan Smith had the only interception of the game with a pass deflection. Roquan Smith having a great game. 2 sacks for the Ravens defense. David Ojabo having 1, and then Trenton Simpson with 0.5, along with Made Bike with another half a set with the other half. And also Trenton Simpson deflected a pass that nobody even talked about because the commentators were glazing over Patrick Mahomes' ability to catch the ball instead of the guy who deflected it to him so that he didn't get that first down. Really, NFL commentators, you have to do better than that. Anyways, the Ravens defense did all they could. Ravens offense did all they could. It just wasn't enough. And as for the Chiefs defense, Chris Jones had the only sack in the game. J.V. Watson had 11 tackles and a pass deflection. Jeez, wow. Chris Jones even forced a fumble that was recovered by a defender that I saw. Felix Anadike Uzama was the one who recovered it, I'm just now seeing. And Jalen Watson had a very monster game with the tackles. So did Justin Reed. Nick Bolton and Leo Chenal had some good games. Leo Chenal and Jones had 2 tackles for loss. And Karlaftis was pretty silent down there in there. Yeah. And I also heard about the offensive line for Kansas City. Kingsley Suamataia, one of the BYU boys, apparently is being called elite after his NFL debut as a rookie starting left tackle. So that's very nice to see, but I hope he doesn't get cursed by that media bias. And as for the kicking, Justin Tucker, unfortunately, 2 of 3 field goals he missed a 50-plus yarder. And I hate to say it, but Harrison Butker might be the best kicker in the NFL now. Justin Tucker is past his prime. I think Harrison Butker is stepping in as the one who is Mr. Automatic this year. Justin Tucker did make 2 extra points, but that's pretty much it. He missed a field goal. That was one of the big differences in the game. And Harrison Butker did pretty awesome. Matt Ariza, 3 punts. There were only a total of 5 punts all game, so props to Ravens and the Chiefs for getting it done on offense. Chiefs just were the better team this week. Oh, and by the way, Chiefs, I am so sorry for not picking you this week. I would love to gloat over the fact that I went 12-4 on my picks, but one of my picks that I got wrong was the Thursday night football game. Again, Chiefs, very sorry for not picking y'all. I'll try not to make that mistake again. Up next was the Friday night game in Sao Paulo, Brazil, 34-29, and I have heard that it was a very bad stadium. My suggestion, never use that stadium again. No offense to the people in Brazil, of course, but that was just a complete mockery. And it was a good game. It was just the field was just was not it. As for how the offenses performed, Jordan Love unfortunately went down with a leg injury at the end of the game. I'm really hoping he's okay, but I just heard that he has just an MCL sprain and he'll miss a couple weeks. So thankfully he avoided anything too serious. He had 17-34 for 260, 2 touchdowns and a pick, so he didn't do that badly. But Josh Jacobs did fumble the football, which is very concerning, even though he had 16 carries for 84 yards, with 4 for 46 for Emmanuel Wilson. But man, the guy of the receiving corps, Jaden Reed, the player of the team on offense was Jaden Reed. 4 catches, 138 yards, and a score with a 70-yarder as his longest reception. That is unbelievable. He led every receiver by far. And as for the Eagles, I did not appreciate Jalen Hurts turning the ball over 3 times. 20 of 34, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. He didn't have a bad game, but the 3 turnovers really pissed me off. And he also had 13 carries for 33 yards. I was hoping that he would get a rushing touchdown, but unfortunately that did not happen because the player of the game was indeed Saquon Barkley with 24 carries, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and he got a receiving touchdown as well. 3 total touchdowns. And A.J. Brown had 5 catches, 119 yards, a touchdown. Devontae Smith had 7 catches for 84 yards. And that was pretty much how the Eagles were able to outlast the Packers with the high-power offense they were able to have. For the Packers defense, there were 2 interceptions, one by Jair Alexander and one by Xavier McKinney. Jair Alexander, I heard he got completely burnt by A.J. Brown early on in the game. There's already been photos of it. Everybody's been talking about it. Javon Bullard and Quay Walker got 11 tackles each, so that's pretty good for them. Rashawn Gary and Keyshawn Nixon both getting sacks on Jalen Hurts. And the 2 people who got fumbles were Devontae Wyatt and Bo Melton. And that's pretty much it for defense for the Packers, with quite a lot of stuff going on, with 6 pass deflections as well. And as for the Eagles, Zach Bond with 2 sacks and 15 tackles. This guy actually really showed out in the opener of the season. Reed Blankenship got an interception on Jordan Love. There were 4 pass deflections in the game. Zach Bond also had 2 quarterback hits. Darius Slay ended up getting a forced fumble, with Saquon Barkley even recovering one, probably for Jalen Hurts. And Zach Bond was the player of the game on defense for the Philadelphia Eagles. So in the game for the kickers, Jake Elliott made every single one of his kicks. There were only 4 punts. Brandon Narveson only missed 1 field goal. But you know what? It's all right. It happens, and we're going to miss every once in a while, but Narveson actually didn't have a bad game, so props to both teams for making it a very competitive game, and apologize to the Eagles for not picking them again. I picked the Packers for this game, and man, I regret picking the Packers and Ravens for the Thursday night and Friday night games. I definitely do. Oh my god. Can you not make me relive this? Oh my goodness. So, kicking off the Sunday noon slate, we got my team, the Atlanta Falcons, losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. Like, what was that? What even was that? Like, we looked so badly. We looked so bad. Offensively, we looked terrible. Defense, we did great, but offense was just too terrible, was too far up their behinds to even do anything. And it's not like the Pittsburgh offense was even good either. 17 of 23 for 156 yards, 14 carries for 57 for Justin Fields. He carried the ball 14 times. That really goes to show how they're going to use Justin Fields when they play him. Najee had 70 yards for rushing. George Pickens had 6 catches for 85 yards. Oh boy. And there was literally nothing else for that Steelers offense. And for Atlanta's offense, oh dear. Kirk Cousins had a horrible game. 16-26 for 155. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Bijan Robinson, he didn't do too much on the ground because he was also a pass catcher in this game as well. He had a total of 111 yards. Raymond McLeod led the team in receiving with 52 yards. It's not saying much. Kyle Pitts did have a nice touchdown, even though he was wide open. But that was pretty much it for all the offenses. Just a whole load of nothing. Let me just say, TJ Watt is one of the best players to ever step foot in a Steelers uniform of recent memory. 2 picks for Deshaun Elliott and Dante Jackson as well. He and TJ and Martravius Adams both had sacks. TJ Watt even had a fumble recovery and 2 tackles for the loss. Micah Fitzpatrick had 7 tackles, so he was a pretty good corner as well. There were 2 pass deflections for Jackson and Elliott as well. And yeah, TJ Watt definitely really showed up for that Steelers defense and when he needed to, because the Steelers offense decided not to. Somebody had to show up, and apparently it was the Steelers defense. Let me just say Matt Judon was actually not a bad signing. I mean, Grady Jarrett had 1.5 sacks, and Matt Judon had the other half. Ken Ellis had 9 tackles. Grady Jarrett even had 3 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss. Mike Hughes had 3 tackles for loss. James Smith-Williams had 2. Justin Simmons even had a pass deflection. I think Justin Simmons and Matt Judon will be good signings at the end of the time. Our defense wasn't that bad. It was just, we just could not have our offense do anything. Our offense just could not move the ball. They couldn't score. Like, we were doing everything we could on defense. It's just the offense just stunk it up for us, and we ended up taking the L. I'm not even going to talk about the kicking because Chris Boswell made 6 of 6 field goals. I think he should be the special teams player of the week, unless maybe Jake Moody might deserve it as well. I will talk about him later. And Younghoe Koo even had a field goal as well and an extra point. So yeah, the defenses played amazingly. It was just the Atlanta's offense was just too bad to even recover from. So up next we have the Arizona Cardinals and the Buffalo Bills. This was a great game as well. Shout out to the Cardinals for making this game close. I did not think it was going to be that close, but hey, Cardinals, you proved me wrong. This was actually one of the first games that I got correct. And I was not expecting the outcome to be as close as it was. That's going to go for a lot of games because it was week 1. We don't know exactly how each team is going to perform until the season starts to progress every once in a while. As for the offenses, Kyler Murray had 21 of 31 for 162 yards and touchdown. Both quarterbacks fumbled to the other team. He actually had 5 for 57 with James Conner getting a touchdown. He threw a touchdown to Michael Wilson, even though Greg Dortch led the team in receiving yards. I will not stop making fun of Greg Dortch's name. No offense to you, of course. Trey McBride had 5 for 30 yards. I mean, he didn't do terrible at all. But Josh Allen on the other side, 2 touchdowns through the air and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He was able to throw a touchdown to Khalil Shakir and Matt Collins. Keon Coleman had 4 for 51. And there was also Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who came from the Chiefs with 1 for 19. Curtis Samuel, free agency pickup, only had 2 for 15. Dalton Kincaid, one of their best weapons, had 1 for 11. Dawson Knox had 1 for 23. Like, what's going on there? And James Cook even had 71 rushing yards, 3 for 32. I mean, what in the world happened here? As for the defenses, Kytrell Clark and Roy Lopez got sacks. Pass deflections by Mac Wilson and Jalen Thompson. 11 sacks and 11 tackles and 10 tackles for Kaiser Wade and Buda Baker, with a forced fumble by Lopez and Justin Jones gaining a recovery. And also for the Buffalo defense, we had Greg Rousseau get 3 sacks. He and Von Miller are going to eat up the rest of the NFL if you do not have good offensive line. Von Miller apparently is back. His contract still one of the worst in the entire league. Terrell Bernard and Cam Lewis having double-digit tackles, and a fumble recovery by Dorian Williams because of Greg Rousseau getting a strip sack and 3 tackles for loss. So amazing job for Buffalo's defense, creating some havoc on the rest of the AFC. So anyways, DJ Dallas ended up having a kick return for a touchdown. If you could see up there, yes, he had a 96-yard return for a touchdown. And as for kicking, everybody made their kicks, so nothing too concerning about the kicking. And the kick return by DJ Dallas was actually pretty incredible to get the Cardinals in the game for at least a while. Up next, we have the Tennessee Titans blowing a 17-point lead to the Chicago Bears. Like, what on earth happened here, Tennessee? Like, how did you blow this lead to the Caleb Williams-led Bears? What? Like, the offensive production for Tennessee's was way better than the Chicago's production on offense, even though Will Levis had 3 turnovers in the game, 127 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. He actually had a really bad game. And Tony Pollard had 82 yards and a touchdown. And the only touchdown that was thrown to him was to Okonkwo, with Calvin Ridley leading the receivers with 3 catches for 50 yards. And then, of course, the Bears' offense was just non-existent. Like, running game was horrible. The passing game was horrible. Tennessee had some yardage production, but the turnovers really kept Chicago in the game. And speaking of defense, for Tennessee, there were 2 sacks by Joseph Day and Landry, and there was a forced fumble by Monty Hooker, and Chestnut was able to recover the fumble, and there was basically only 4-5 pass deflections, and that's pretty much it for the Tennessee's defense. But as far as Chicago's defense goes, they had 2 defensive touchdowns the entire game. It was literally pick 6. There were 2 interceptions by Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson. There was also a fumble recovery by TJ Edwards. There were 2 defensive touchdowns the entire game. Not sure why this site isn't showing it. And there was also Taylor Taylor and Gervon Dexter with a sack, with 2 and 1 sacks. Yeah, and Tyreek Stevenson had a pick 6. And yeah, that was all she wrote. And we also had a block kick for the Bears defense. So, yeah, the Bears defense completely won the Bears the game. I feel like that defense should at least get some consideration for Players of the Week for this week on defense. Next up, we had the New England Patriots going into Cincy and upsetting the Bengals. I was not expecting the Patriots to be this good. Cincinnati, what happened here? 10-0 at halftime and you lose by 6. What is going on? I mean, Jacoby Brissett didn't really have a good game. I mean, 15-24 for 121 yards. He got sent once. But Ramondre Stevenson completely went off on offense in the rushing game. 120 yards, 25 carries, and a touchdown? Like, what even just happened here? And the receiving core wasn't even that great. And as for Cincinnati, Joe Burrow didn't do that bad. I mean, he had 21-29, 164 yards. I mean, he was accurate. Zach Moss got a touchdown, 44 yards on rushing game, and Jamar Chase had only 6 catches and 6 targets, and he had as many targets as Andre Iosivas. Like, what happened here? Like, why in the world is Jamar Chase not getting the most targets on the team? Why is he tied? That might be part of the reason why the Bengals just completely did not get it done against the Patriots. And as for the Pats defense, I mean, come on. There were 3 pass deflections. Keon White apparently is a monster with 2.5 sacks. And as far as Christian Gonzalez goes, I mean, he didn't really get any pass deflections. He only had 2 tackles, so he was literally just a bunch of nothing in there. There were 3 fumbles, forced fumbles by Keon White, Kyle Duggar, and Joe Cardona. 2 of them being recovered by defenders, Marcus Jones and Jalen Hawkins. And Jawan Bentley even had 12 tackles, including a half a sack. And as for the Bengals defense, they only got there 1 time with 2 pass deflections. Logan Wilson had 13 tackles and 3 quarterback hits, along with a forced fumble. What even happened? Like, they couldn't even get to the quarterback. And also, the offensive line of the Patriots just allowed Ramondre Stevenson to get 120 rushing yards in the game. That's pretty much how the Patriots won. Up next, we had the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. I was predicting correct on this one, but the game should not have been this close. And holy cow, both quarterbacks actually played pretty well. I mean, of course, for offense, C.J. Stroud completely balled out with 24-32, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. He didn't ball out the best as far as quarterbacks. He did get sacked 4 times in this game, but Joe Mixon absolutely went bonkers on the Colts defense. 159 yards at a touchdown. Man, Houston's offensive line is underrated. Seriously. And then Nico Collins had 117 yards. Are you serious right now? And he had 8 targets as well. Stephon Diggs had 6 targets, and he caught every single one of them. He had 6 catches for 33 yards and 2 touchdowns. And also, they had Anthony Richardson. He had 9 of 19 for 212, 2 touchdowns and 1 pick. He got sacked twice. He had that one huge throw to Alec Pierce that was just unbelievable. It was a 60-yard bomb to Mr. Alec Pierce. And Ashton Dulin even had a touchdown. Michael Pittman had 8 targets, and he only caught 4 of them for 31 yards and no touchdowns. What just happened here? It was just Colts. Anthony Richardson, I have heard, he will keep you in the game as much as he will keep you out of the game. So, yeah, the Colts offense just did not do enough. And I almost forgot, he had a huge 19-yard run for like a score, and nobody could bring him down. Like, not even a rhinoceros would even be able to bring him down. Not even a hippo would be able to bring him down. And as for defense, Fatukazi and Mario Edwards had sacks. And if you're wondering why Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson are not getting sacks, if they weren't playing Anthony Richardson, you would see a lot more sacks for those two. You should watch out for that. And by the way, Danielle Hunter's on Houston, not Minnesota, so I made that mistake. That's my bad. So, and Henry Tutu had 7 combined tackles, and Mario Edwards and Fatukazi had both of the quarterback hits. And as for the Colts defense, DeForest Buckner had 1.5 sacks. I mean, the Colts defense sacked Stroud 4 times, and they weren't doing that bad. There was a pass deflection by Jalen Jones, and there was also an interception by Kalen Ballard that I completely missed. And they had a lot of quarterback hits on C.J. Stroud, so the pros were being a lot pressured. Colts defense did all they could. Just the offense just got a little suspect, and it just wasn't enough. Up next, we had the Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to Hard Rock Stadium to play the Miami Dolphins. This game was close, and the way it ended was unreal. Like, it came down to a last-second field goal by Jason Sanders to win it all, to win the whole thing, and Jacksonville had a lead, but they just squandered it. As for the offenses, Trevor Lawrence didn't play that badly. 12 of 21 for 162 yards and a touchdown, no turnovers for him. Travis Etienne had the one fumble, even though he did score a touchdown. With Tank Bixby even has his 73 yards. Gabe Davis having 3 catches for 62 yards. UCF brother from Buffalo went to Jacksonville. And Brian Thomas even had a touchdown. That was a crazy catch for a touchdown from what I saw. And as far as the Dolphins offense goes, Tua Tagovailoa with 338 yards and a touchdown. 239 of those went to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. 99 of those went to other receivers. Tyreek Hill had 130 and a touchdown, 7 grabs with 12 targets. Jalen Waddle caught all 5 of his targets for 109 yards. Good grief. The rushing offense, Devon Achane had a touchdown. He even had 7 catches for 76 yards. Yeah, the passing game for the offense of the Dolphins, man, it's going to be hard to stop. And for Thursday night, yeah, that's going to be hard to stop if you're Buffalo's defense, because Jacksonville fought very hard against that passing offense. It just wasn't enough. I don't think the Bills are going to fare much better than that. And as defense goes, Travon Walker is pretty much him. He had 2 sacks. Aaron Armstead had a sack. They did all they could. They sacked him 3 times. There were a couple guys with tackles for loss I will not get into. Darnell Savage didn't do much except for getting 2 pass deflections. Josh Hines-Allen had 1 pass deflection, 2 tackles all game. Foye Oluokun, a former Falcon, had 11 tackles. Devin Lloyd and Antonio Johnson even had 9 tackles, which is insane. Yeah, and for the Dolphins defense, there were no turnovers whatsoever in the game. Well, maybe 1 fumble. It was 1 fumble by Travis Etienne that was recovered by Kader Kohu. Javon Holland ended up knocking it out. Elijah Campbell even knocked another ball out. There were 3 sacks by Father Time himself, Calais Campbell, Manuel Ogba, and Jalen Phillips. The leader in tackles for this team was David Long. And yeah, and as I said before, it came down to a game-winning field goal by Jason Sanders to win the whole game. Oh dear, and now we have the New Orleans Saints completely going medieval on the Carolina Panthers. Yeah, the Carolina Panthers might be one of the worst teams in the NFL for years to come, unless they can fix their whole Bryce Young situation, protecting him, or they could get a replacement for him very, very soon. Bryce Young looks like a complete boss with 13 of 30, 161 yards and 2 picks, and there was literally nothing to show for. If you were the Carolina offense, nobody even did anything whatsoever. Maybe Adam Thielen with 3 for 49, 3 catches. Jonathan Mingo with 2 of his 5 targets being caught for 40 yards. Xavier Legette had the most targets apparently over Thielen and Jonathan Mingo, so that says Xavier Legette might be one of the go-to receivers for this team. That's not saying much. And as for the Saints defense, Derek Carr, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 19 of 23. He had a monster game. Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams both had a pair of rushing touchdowns. Rashid Shaheed had a 59-yard touchdown. Foster Moreau had one, and Jawan Johnson had a touchdown. Yeah, long story short, the Saints just completely went off on the Carolina Panthers all game. Just crazy. And defensively, really only a couple things to talk about. There were 3 pass deflections in the game, and Iko Leota had a sack, and Shat Thompson with 10 tackles. Brian Burns not being on the field really says that Carolina is going to be in for a rude awakening with what happened just on Sunday. And as for the Saints, there were 2 picks by Jordan Howard and Will Harris. Alontae Taylor having 3 sacks is very concerning for any offense to have to go against him. Mario Davis also had a sack. The most tackles by one player was 6 by Taylor. He had 3 quarterback hits because of the 3 sacks. Tyrann Mathieu had a forced fumble and recovery. Chase Young even had two quarterback hits. Just just insane. Like, there was just no chance that the Panthers had to even compete with the Saints. Like, the Saints just dominated the entire game. That's how Alabama should play against South Florida, but they don't do that, do they? Up next, we have the Minnesota Vikings traveling to MetLife to take on the Giants. And by the way, Giants never ever wear those uniforms again. They were hideous then, they're hideous now. And the Vikings just completely dismantled the Giants. Like, they made Sam Darnold look good. Don't believe me? Sam Darnold had 19 of 24 for 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and only 1 pick. And he was sacked once. Like, come on now. And as for rushing game, Aaron Jones, 94 yards and a touchdown. Absolutely insane numbers from him. Justin Jefferson had 4 for 59 and a touchdown. They also had Jalen Naylor getting a 21-yard reception for a touchdown. That was pretty impressive. And as for the Giants, oh boy. Daniel Jones completely looks completely lost. He had a big contract. He just has no help whatsoever from his offensive line. Rushing game, definitely not it. Ever since Saquon Barkley left, the rushing game has never been the same. And what in the world happened here? Of all the targets that Daniel Jones had, 12 of them went to Wan'Dale Robinson. 7 of them went to Malik Neighbors, who had 5 catches for 66 yards. Wan'Dale had 6 catches for 44 yards. And Jalen Hyatt didn't have a single catch, and he only got targeted once. Like, what is going on here in New York? As for the defenses, Pat Jones had 2 sacks, with Harrison Phillips, Dallas Turner, and Van Ginkel each having 1 as well. Van Ginkel even had an interception, so did Harrison Smith. It makes me wonder, why didn't we take Dallas Turner if he's already getting a sack in his NFL debut, like regular season? Byron Murphy had 9 tackles with a tackle for loss. Pat Jones had 2 tackles for loss. Dallas Turner also had a tackle for loss. Like, what even happened here? Like, the Vikings just completely overmatched the New York Giants. And as for the Giants, Kayvon Thibodeau only had 1 quarterback hit. Dexter Lawrence had the only sack on Sam Darnold. And Darius Masao had the interception. 2 fumble recoveries for the Giants. It looks like Dane Benton and Bobby Okereke had fumble recoveries, and Andrew Phillips had a forced fumble, and that was pretty much it. The most tackles for the Giants player was Tyler Newman with 7, and that's pretty much it. On to the Sunday 4 and 4:25 games, we had the Chargers take on the Raiders, with Chargers pulling it out in the end. Raiders had an okay start, and then what in the world happened to Antonio Pierce? You guys had 0 points for the second and third quarter, and you only had a field goal in the final quarter to even end things. Los Angeles just, they had a rough start with no touchdowns until the fourth quarter. Jim Harbaugh wins his first game back in the NFL as the Chargers head coach. As for the offenses, Gardner Minshew was mid, 25-33, 257 yards, a touchdown and a pick. He also lost a fumble along with Zamir White. Rushing game was non-existent. Brock Bowers having a lot of targets. 6 catches for 58 yards for 1 tight end is crazy. And Michael Mayer only had 2 catches on 3 targets. Devontae Adams, 5 catches for 59 yards. Alexander Madison had the only passing touchdown for the Raiders, the only touchdown of the game. Justin Herbert also had a passing touchdown to Ladd McConkey. That was the only touchdown for them. 17-26 for 144 and a touchdown. He only got sacked once. Minshew got sacked 4 times. J.K. Dobbins, I had him on my bench. I did not think he would get 135 yards and a score. So that was pretty insane. Receiving numbers, aside for the touchdown for Ladd McConkey, was just non-existent. Quentin Johnston only got targeted 5 times. McConkey got targeted 7 times. At least Quentin Johnston isn't dropping the ball so much. And as for defenses, the only person who had a sack was Max Crosby. He is still pretty elite for pass rushing. And Robert Spillane having 10 combined tackles. Crosby even had 3 quarterback hits all games, so that's pretty good for him. And as for the Chargers, Khalil Mack going against his former team, or one of his former teams in the Raiders. He had 1.5 sacks. Poona Ford had an interception, 2 pass deflections. Khalil Mack even had a fumble recovery. Joey Bosa had a forced fumble and a sack. Morgan Fox even had a half a sack. And Bosa and Dayan Henley and Derwin James had 7 tackles. That was tied for the most. And 2 fumble recoveries. There was also Jasir Taylor who had 1. And yeah, 1 touchdown for each team. Like, it was just a pretty mid game for the offenses for both teams. And the Chargers defense ended up stepping up when it mattered most. Next up on the list, we have the Denver Broncos traveling to Lumen Field to take on the Seattle Seahawks. Mike Macdonald's first year coaching the Seahawks and Sean Payton's second year coaching the Broncos. Seahawks survive a thriller. Broncos do come up short, but it was not because of Bo Nix, I will tell you that. Bo Nix was not the reason that they were still in this game. Yeah, the Broncos offense was just, it was a mess. I mean, Bo Nix had a rushing touchdown, but 138 yards on 26 of 42 for 138 yards and 2 interceptions. And Julian McLaughlin even fumbled the football, which is very unfortunate for him. Javonte Williams had 8 carries for 23 yards, and he only had 1 catch. Like, what happened? He's on my fantasy team. That's why I'm a little upset. 10 carries for 27 yards. Like, the rushing game was non-existent besides the touchdown. Devon Bailey had 8 catches for 39 yards. Cortland Sutton had 12 targets. He only caught 4 of them. That is very concerning. And Josh Reynolds had 5 catches for 45 yards. And as for the Seahawks, you had Geno Smith getting a touchdown and a pick, and 1825 for 171. Kenneth Walker went off for me. I had both of the starting running backs for this entire game for the Seahawks and Broncos game. Kenneth Walker ended up doing the most, 103 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Geno Smith also had a rushing touchdown, and Zach Charbonnet had a receiving touchdown. Tyler Lockett led the receivers with 6 catches for 77 yards. The fact that DK Metcalf only had 4 targets is very problematic, if you ask me, because Tyler Lockett is their second receiver on their depth chart, and Jackson Smith-Njigba is getting less targets than Noah Fant, their tight end, who only caught 2 of them. So, yeah. What is going on in Seattle with DK Metcalf? Trust me when I say that defense was the reason that these guys were even in this thing. There were 2 safeties, almost 3. Alex Singleton had an interception. Jonathan Cooper had 2 sacks. There were a couple tackles for loss for safety. There were 2 fumble recoveries. I think that was just by the offense. 4 quarterback hits as well for Cooper. Riley Moss, 12 tackles. Sheesh. And like I said before, there were also 2 safeties on the game for the Broncos defense. And as for Seattle, Julian Love and Tariq Woolen had picks for the Seahawks. Boye Mafe and Derek Hall had sacks. Each had sacks. And 12 tackles for Julian Love, 10 for Tyrell Dodson. There was also a fumble recovery by Jerome Baker. 2 forced fumbles by Julian Love and Kavon Wallace. So, despite the Broncos' defensive pursuit, the offense just could not get back in the game and take the lead at the end. Up next, we had the Dallas Cowboys and Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. And goodness gracious, besides that garbage time touchdown by the Cleveland Browns, oh boy, they were in a mess against the Dallas Cowboys. I told you, man, that defense of the Cowboys is going to overpower Deshaun Watson, and Deshaun Watson really hasn't done anything since he's been with the Browns. He really only played very few games. He's a little washed. They're hoping he's going to be in his Houston years when he was in his prime, but I do not see it happening at all. I mean, offensively, Dallas played all right. 19 of 32 for 179 and a touchdown for Dak. Zeke Elliott getting the only rushing touchdown with 40 yards. I mean, the rushing game wasn't really anything special. CeeDee Lamb had 5 catches for 61 yards and even had 25 rushing yards. He didn't do terribly for me. With 10 targets, the fact that he only caught 5 of them really does concern me because I do have him as my very first pick in my fantasy league draft. Brandon Cooks had 4 for 40 yards and touchdown, which I cannot believe happened. Jalen Torber had 1 for 12. Jake Ferguson got hurt early on the game. That's why he had to leave the game early. And, yeah, 3 catches for 15 yards. Oh, dear. Not looking so promising there. And as for Cleveland's offense, Deshaun Watson looks lost. 24-45, 169, a touchdown and 2 picks. 6 times he was sacked. And he fumbled once, but it was not a turnover at that time. Besides Jerome Ford's touchdown, the fact that Nick Chubb is out is extremely concerning for them. And Jerome Ford was very much involved in the passing game with 6 catches for only 25 yards. David Njoku had 4 catches for 44 yards, and Jerry Jeudy even had a touchdown, with Amari Cooper only having 2 catches on his 9 targets. Jerry Jeudy having 8 targets with only 3 catches. Like, Jerome Ford led the team in receptions, with David Njoku leading the team in yards. Like, what is going on in Cleveland? And as for defense, Eric Kendricks and DeMarcus Lawrence had 2 sacks. Parsons and Overshown having a sack each. Be careful to NFL offenses. The Dallas Cowboys defense is coming to play. Diggs and Kendricks having interceptions. Unfortunately, Jerome Bland did not get involved in this game, I'm very sure. Yeah, he was not involved. Overshown had the most tackles with 11. There was a forced fumble by Lawrence, and that was not recovered by a defensive player. But 5 quarterback hits for Parsons and 4 for Lawrence. That front 7 is disgusting for Dallas. And for the Browns defense, Darius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Myles Garrett having a sack. Myles Garrett, current Defensive Player of the Year. And he only has a tackle for loss and a forced fumble. I mean, it was not bad, and he had a sack as well. Owusu Koromoa had 9 tackles, along with Juan Thornhill. No Taki, which I wish he was still there. But, can't have nice things, can you? Shelby Harris even had a quarterback hit, and Joel Petonio recovered the 1 fumble for Cleveland to avoid the turnover. And that was pretty much it for Cleveland. They could get to the quarterback, and even Denzel Ward had 3 pass deflections. So he is still a pretty solid corner, but unfortunately, it just did not go too well for the Browns at all, because the Cowboys were just firing at will. In the last 4 o'clock game on Sunday was the Washington Commanders taking on Tampa Bay. Washington, despite having Jalen Daniels, just could not keep up with Tampa Bay's offense. Todd Bowles, once again being in a weak division like the NFC South, is probably going to keep his job like he always does. So anyways, for the offense, Jalen Daniels didn't play terribly. I mean, he was pretty accurate with 184 yards and 17-24. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, and Brian Robinson even had a rushing touchdown of his own. Fortunately, no great receiving stats at all. And then for Tampa Bay's offense, Baker Mayfield completely dismantled that defense. 24-30, 4 touchdowns, 289 yards. With the rushing game, I mean, Bucky Irving having 62 yards and 9 carries is crazy. But then Chris Godwin with 8 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans on my fantasy team having 5 catches, 61 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Jalen McMillan having a 32-yard touchdown. Oh, man. The passing offense of Baker Mayfield may have just gotten him contention for Player of the Week for Week 1. Fortunately for the defenses, there were no interceptions. I mean, Cleveland Farrell had the only sack. I mean, people wrote him off as a bust, but he is actually a pretty solid tackle, I guess. There were 2 pass deflections by St. Juste and Ipinogine. 10 tackles for Bobby Wagner, and he's 40 years old or something like that. Juan Martin had 9 tackles, and yeah, that's about it for the Washington defense. And as for Tampa Bay, 2 sacks by Servocio Dennis and Joe Treon Shiika. I hope I didn't say that name wrong. I probably did, but Jordan Whitehead and Christian Isian having pass deflections, and it was just an offensive battle, and it was just a one-sided offensive battle at that. Jaden Daniels had 2 rushing touchdowns. Brian Robinson had a touchdown, but they just could not keep up with Tampa Bay's incredible passing offense. And that is why I have Tampa Bay as the team that will win the NFC South once again. And for the Sunday night game, we had the Los Angeles Rams traveling to Ford Field. Matt Stafford's homecoming at Ford Field again against the Detroit Lions, and it went to overtime as well. Sean McVay's Dan Campbell once again, a rematch from the wild card game. Matt Stafford going back to Detroit again. And man, this Sunday night game delivered a lot of emotion, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of joy. It had everything you wanted in an NFL game as far as emotions go. I mean, all jokes aside, the offenses didn't look great at all. Nothing but spectacular. 34-49 from Matt Stafford, 300 yards, a touchdown and a pick. He was sacked twice. Jared Goff was sacked twice. He also had a touchdown and a pick, but for 100 less yards, and Goff had 18 of 28. But Kyrie Williams had a touchdown for 50 yards, but Cooper Kupp had 14 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Puka Nacua had to leave the game early, despite having 4 catches for 35 yards. I am hoping Puka Nacua is okay because I love that guy. He is a BYU guy. Unfortunately, I don't have him on my fantasy team, but I still really do hope he is going to be okay. Tyler Johnson had 5 catches for 79 yards, which is crazy, and a 63-yard reception as well. Kobe Parkinson, 4 for 47, and Demarcus Robinson, 4 for 42. Crazy. And then, for rushing stats, David Montgomery had a 21-yarder as his longest. He had 17 carries, 91 yards, and the game-winning touchdown in overtime. Jahmyr Gibbs even had a touchdown, 11 carries for 40 yards. So that's pretty cool. Jameson Williams, 52-yard touchdown, 5 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown, fantasy owners are in shambles. 6 targets, second most, tied with Gibbs with 4 catches for 34 yards, and he has 3 catches for 13 yards. Sam Laporta even beat him in receptions with 4 for 45 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown fans, oh dear. Amon-Ra St. Brown has a lot of explaining to do. Defensively, Jared Verse ended up having a sack along with Byron Young. John Johnson and Troy Reeder, along with Kobe Durant, had deflections for the Rams defense. Quentin Lee had 10 tackles. Christian Roseboom had 9 tackles. 2 quarterback hits for Jared Verse. 1 for Quentin Lake, 1 for Byron Young. 10 tackles for Lake. And, 2 sacks, 3 pass deflections. Not much to really show for, except for the interception by John Johnson I completely missed. And as for Detroit's defense, Kirby Joseph had the pick. Aiden Hutchinson had a sack. He is still pretty good. Levi Wuzurike and Davenport combined for a sack. Brian Branch had 3 pass deflections. He's going to be a good safety for years to come. And Alex and Anzalo and Carlton Davis, 13 and 10 tackles. Crazy. Davenport and Hutchinson had 4 quarterback hits. Levi had 2. It was a battle of which team had more drive and more passion that day. It ended up being the Detroit Lions this game on Sunday Night Football. And to wrap up this week of reactions, week number 1 is the Monday Night Football game that happened last night between the New York Jets and the 49ers. Aaron Rodgers lasted more than 4 snaps. Hooray! Except his team literally scored a touchdown in garbage time when they were down by 22 points. 19 points. As for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers had 13 of 21 yards for 167 yards, a touchdown and a pick. He got sacked once. Tyrod Taylor even had 6 of 8 for 36 yards and a touchdown. He had some playing time as well, something Zach Wilson will probably never sniff in his entire NFL career. Sadly for him, the rushing game was only by Breece Hall with 16 for 54, and Garrett Wilson completely ended my chances of winning a fantasy football game this week. So I am 0-1. He had 6 catches for 60 yards, but Alan Lazard, 6 catches, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Breece Hall even had 5 catches for 39. Oh, man. I mean, Aaron Rodgers isn't the worst quarterback in the league, but he is a little bit of a shell of his former self. And as for the Niners, accuracy-wise, it wasn't the worst game for Brock Purdy, 231 yards and 19 and 29, but no passing touchdowns. Jordan Mason was the man of the game. Good grief. Jordan Mason, 147 yards on 28 carries and a touchdown. He was the backup to Christian McCaffrey, and man, he delivered some hope for the Niners for when McCaffrey comes back. Deebo Samuel even had a rushing touchdown, and Juwan Jennings led the team in receiving with 5 catches for 64 yards. Deebo Samuel even had 5 catches on 9 targets for 54 yards. George Kittle had 4 catches for 40 yards. I mean, he didn't do terribly, but he didn't do great in terms of how fantasy owners will see him. As far as defense goes, Sauce Gardner, Michael Clemens, and Tony Adams are 3 of the guys who had sacks. I still think that the Jets defense are among one of the best. They just ran into one of the best defenses in the entire NFL. One of the most complete team in my eyes in the entire NFL. With 3 quarterback hits for each of them because they sat them. And Quentin Williams even had a quarterback hit. He only had 3 tackles, but they were pretty much double teaming him the entire game. Tony Adams having 12 tackles. Good grief. And C.J. Mosley and DJ Reed even having some good ones as well. And as for the Niners defense, I saw Fred Warner punch the ball out, and it was recovered by Malik Collins. I saw that one. The best middle linebacker in the National Football League, in my personal opinion. I think he still is. And also there was 1 sack for Leonard Floyd, and Flanagan Fowles had the only interception of the game. Fred Warner even had 7 tackles. Just proves to you that he is the best middle linebacker in the NFL. Leonard Floyd even had a tackle for loss because he got a sack. So, yeah, Jordan Mason went off, and there was literally it. And, yeah, field goals. There were 6 field goals by Moody, and he and Boswell are candidates definitely for Special Teams Player of the Week. And hopefully the awards will credit these 2, or at least in some way, honorable mentions. Yeah, either one of them will get honorable mention and also the award for Player of the Week. I mean, both teams did great, but the Niners were just a lot better. Defensively, both teams did great. Niners was just a little bit better today. And that is going to do it for Week 1 reactions. Tomorrow I will definitely try to do Week 2 predictions. And hopefully next week for Week 2 I will get in the win column from Fantasy Football League. And also I will have a better than 12-4 record for my Week 1 predictions. Anyways, until next time, see you guys soon. Peace.